Well, good afternoon. This is Matt Roof with Thomas B. Miller and Associates, and I want to welcome everybody who's been able to join us this afternoon. Thomas B. Miller and Associates is a 30-year economic development firm, and I'm Director of Economic Development Community Resiliency and worked with Dearborn and Franklin counties on a regional economic development plan. And I want to thank the Indiana Economic Development Corporation that helped underwrite this project. This is a pilot regional plan, and it's very important as the Indiana Economic Development Corporation looks around the state at strengths and areas for improvement and economic opportunity. One of the big focuses has been regional development and trying to bring communities and counties together where it made sense so that economic development can be strengthened. And fortunately, Thomas B. Miller, we're fortunate to work often with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation and helped guide Dearborn County representatives and Franklin County representatives through a process for creating a pilot regional economic development plan. And with that, I will turn it over in just a moment to Jim Stanton of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, but also want to let you know that Mike Perlber and Nick Lawrence, representing Dearborn and Lawrence counties, will also be presenting. And that we're going to ask to, you may have questions or comments you'd like to share. If you could share those in the chat box. Some of us, most of us probably, are some fairly familiar now with the Zoom, but if you would, and Mike will capture those, and then we'll try to address those at the end. So this presentation of the plan, the highlights of the plan, will be about 30 minutes, 40 minutes. We'll try to move through it fairly quickly, but make sure we address the key issues. And then we'll take your questions at the end. So with that, I'm going to go to the next slide, Mike, and ask Jim Stanton of Indiana Economic Development Corporation to give everybody some background on IEDC and their involvement. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Matt. It's a pleasure to be working together with you. Matt and I go back about 30 years to his days at Department of Commerce and my days as a grant writer at a regional planning group up in Northwest Indiana. And the more things change, I guess, the more they stay the same.
That's right. That's right, Jim.
Yeah. Again, Jim Stanton, Senior Vice President and Chief Business Development Officer for the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. I've been with the agency for 15 years, been in economic development a little over 30 years, and really glad to be joining you all this afternoon and share in this opportunity and be a part of something that we strongly believe is a very important initiative for the counties here. I won't bore you by reading all these slides. I'm not sure I could stay awake this time of the afternoon going through this entire thing, but just know that the Indiana Economic Development Corporation is the state's lead economic development agency. We are a public-private partnership that's governed by a board of directors and chaired by Governor Holcomb. You may think of economic development organizations, especially at the state level, as more marketing and promotion operations, but truly successful state agencies really look to partner with regional agencies and local economic development organizations, not only to promote and work specifically on projects and offer incentives and whatnot, but really build capacity at the local level. When I was a local economic developer in a rural county, the motto I always had was to make sure your house is ready for when the company comes. And that is a personal mantra. It's a professional mantra in that when you know someone's coming to your community to look around and invariably or possibly make one of the largest investment decisions of their lives or careers, you want to make sure that everything is put together well. You've got, you present well, you've got everything lined up, your processes are in good shape. And we like to do that with we want to do that with communities. And this initiative and our funding for this really is related to our Vision 2020 strategic plan, in that we did want to focus on local and regional economic development organizations, see how we can help them come together, build capacity. And Mike, you can advance to the next slide, I think. And just see what things could happen. You know, this isn't, we didn't go into this looking to pick some rural or suburban counties that weren't making an effort. And that's where I think Dearborn and Franklin counties really stood out. Is you all have been trying to collaborate, you've been working together, you've been talking a lot, talked a lot with both groups. And you know, there was a desire there, and we just happened to have some money that we could put into it, and we were glad to do that. But so, you know, when you read the slide here and you see the investment in communities that have unrealized economic potential, I don't know that that's truly the case with Dearborn and Franklin counties. I think really it's they have unrealized potential that they're working on and identifying and moving forward. And I think by getting together and looking at the shared assets, opportunities, and challenges, it's going to make for a really great initiative here, and we're excited to see it. As you can see, we worked with Thomas P. Miller on the outcomes, and I think at the very end of the day, one of the influencing factors for us was one of the people on my team, and just so you know, my function within the group, I oversee our domestic and international business development teams. But Wes Brown has joined us on the call today. Wes is our senior project manager, covering a big part of our central region. He's our top deal maker for this year, and has been in the top 2 or 3 every year since he's been with us. But the neat part for Wes is he's a former resident of Lawrenceburg and wants to see his hometown succeed as well. So we're glad to have Wes on board also. And again, you can see why we thought this was an ideal region for a pilot. Tremendous potential next to a major metro area, a lot of connections that way, but really unique community assets. Again, when I talked about the unrealized economic potential, I think from a pure economic development, and this is more of a, say, an industrial development and production, office, those kind of things, that's where we saw the potential. You know, the area has great community development assets, the casino down there, some of the other, just the beautiful countryside that is that part of the state is an asset as well. So we just felt like this was a great region to do this pilot with, because we think with the unique assets and how you all go about identifying those and exploiting those, we'll be able to replicate this throughout the state and help other areas improve. And with that, are you taking back over, Matt?
I'm going to hand it off to Mike and Nick for just a moment to introduce some of the key stakeholders. If you can just kind of go through that both for each other. Thank you, Jim, for that reference to our history, but also to the importance IEDC plays across the entire state in economic development.
Certainly. So I'll start. So yeah, a lot of shared assets between Dearborn, Franklin counties, being located in the major metro, desirable place to live and have a business, all the opportunity along I-74, and kind of that main connection in terms of roadway between our two counties with State Road 1 kind of being an area of focus. When we met for these stakeholder meetings, starting back last year, it was at a facility in the St. Leon area where there's a lot of shared opportunity being investigated between Dearborn and Franklin counties. So moving on and introducing you to our stakeholder team in Dearborn County. Tim Dahl is on County Council. Guinevere Emery, formerly with the City of Aurora, currently with the City of Lawrenceburg, Andrew Jackson, the superintendent of Sunman Dearborn Community Schools, Randy Maxwell, who's with Maxwell Construction, a very well-respected and very busy local contractor, Mark McCormick, our planning and zoning director in the county, Steve Renahan, who's with the Dearborn County Regional Sewer District. Of course, sewer is a big part of development, particularly when it comes to adding housing and developing industrial sites for new businesses to perhaps locate. Mark Sams, who is a member of our board and also with Civista Bank based here in Lawrenceburg, and Michael Schwebler, who's the president and CEO of High Point Health. And of course, Terry Randall, our president and CEO here at One Dearborn, a part of the team as well. And as for myself, I began working with Terry here at One Dearborn about the time that this strategic planning effort started. It was one of the first meetings, one of my first days on the job was to attend one of the stakeholder sessions and be part of that process, which for me has been great. I was raised in Franklin County, 2002 graduate of Franklin County High School, still have a lot of family that lives in Franklin County, but I live in Dearborn County now. So I thought, that's a great perspective I could help bring and seeing some of the shared opportunities and challenges and everything that exists between Dearborn and Franklin counties. Nick?
Yep, thanks, Mike. And on the Franklin County side of it, we had Michael Beck, the executive director with the Franklin County Convention, Recreation, and Visitors Commission, Scott McDonough, who's a county council member and a member of the Franklin County Redevelopment Commission, Ernie Holtree, who at the time we began this process was the East Central liaison for OKRA, who had been really involved with a lot of community initiatives and now is with the state's broadband initiative. Bob O'Brien, former Brookville Town Council person and a Franklin County or Brookville Redevelopment Commission member. Tom Horninger with FCN Bank. John Palmer, the president of the Franklin County Economic Development Commission and also a member of the Franklin County Redevelopment Commission. Bill Shermer, who's president of the Franklin County Redevelopment Commission, has been a longtime advocate for economic development efforts within Franklin County. Shelley Lunsford, the director of the Franklin County Community Foundation. Todd Thackeray, who is the president of the Brookville Redevelopment Commission. Nancy Main with Brookville Main Street, and then Mick Wills, who has been a prominent supporter of economic development in Brookville and Franklin County at large, and has been a project investor and business owner and entrepreneur. Again, I want to thank all these folks who attended and played a role as stakeholders in this plan. This plan and the outcomes are driven by a lot of the discussions that we had. This was 2 pretty full days that we had to discuss the iterations of the plan and the outcomes. I know on the Franklin County end, we had several follow-up meetings and discussion amongst the stakeholder group to make sure their input was heard and their hands were on the action items within this plan. So again, I want to thank everybody for participating and giving their time for this effort. Mike, you're on mute.
We invited these folks because these are people in both of our communities who believe in the power of regional partnerships. So with that, I think we'll let Matt kind of walk a little bit more through the process. Matt, if you don't mind.
Sure. So give everybody a sense of, well, how did they come about the plan? As Mike and Nick mentioned, Thomas P. Miller and Associates does a lot of market and economic development research. And so through a series of meetings, primarily the first set were to look at some of the economic context of the market for Franklin and Dearborn counties and how that fit to a larger Cincinnati metropolitan area. But then also after that, then the groups came back together to kind of look at the challenges and the advantages of Franklin Dearborn County. And as been mentioned, I think several times already by probably all of us, I think, is I-74 is a huge asset for larger scale economic development efforts. And as folks noted, your natural resources and some of the other amenities with the reservoir, the Ohio River, the casinos, You just have a bundle of assets that are, I think as Jim said, you've got two strong counties, but the key is to how can they better organize for kind of deliberate and determined economic development. So through this effort, then the groups and stakeholders came back together then after kind of going through a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, and then developed a plan around a set of specific goals and action steps, which Mike and Nick will talk about. But first, why don't we go ahead to the next slide, Mike, and we'll talk about some of the context. So I think the big issue for Dearborn and Franklin counties is you've got fairly strong incomes due to some of the work across the count that the counties have. So you have fairly strong incomes. As you can see, a kind of a nice bell curve, but they're a little bit higher than the state or national average on that. The next slide shows, I think, a pretty good distribution of education attainment. Again, a little bit better in some areas in the nation and the state. Overall, fairly good strengths on education and access to education too at the Ivy Tech campus located there, as well as a lot of higher education within the broader 30-mile radius with Cincinnati. The population side, one of the challenges I think for both counties is that you do have an aging population. As you can see, the median age of the population for both Dearborn and Franklin counties is about 43 years old. So that's the middle person of all the people that live in each county. The middle person is 43 years old. So there's more older people pulling that median up a little bit than there is on the national median age of around 37. The state is also right around 37. So this is a bit of a challenge going forward for workforce development, and we'll address some of those needs as we go forward. This is commuting patterns. As you can see, Franklin County is on the left, and the first arrow, I'll just take the arrows as they go across. The first arrow is the number of people who come into Franklin County to work but live outside the county each day. And you can see also then in the middle of the circle is the number of people who live and work in Franklin County. And they're about the same as the folks who come in. But you can see the next arrow, the blue arrow on the right there, shows that a lot of people, not a surprise in the Cincinnati metropolitan area, but they're commuting other places. Probably to the Cincinnati metro area, maybe down to Dearborn, but also over to Ripley County and the Batesville areas as well. And then we look at Dearborn County on the right with a little over 6,000 folks coming into Dearborn County to work every day. And again, similar to Franklin County, about the same number live and work within Dearborn County. But again, the big difference for Dearborn County, as was for Franklin, is most people love living in both counties, but they work somewhere else. So as you can see, 16,000 people leave Dearborn County roughly every day to work in Cincinnati or other places in Kentucky or Ripley County. So there's some commuting. So there's some opportunities to capture this if we can get economic development in to keep those folks near their homes and develop some stronger economic base within the two counties. The next one is the population forecast. This is from Stats Indiana. I think the State Board of Health project these with net growth and net loss of population. You can see the baby boom is aging, but what it is also indicating as you get out another 15, 20 years, that the population gains will start to really slow down for both counties, and they're going to be growing at slower rates than the state and the southeast region of Indiana. But also then, as we get into that sort of middle of the century, again, we're thinking long term now, but you have to think of that way when it comes to workforce and long-term workforce growth. Is there a way to continue to start to grow the population if we can keep more people employed and working in the two counties? And then the real big piece here is to look at the targeted industries analysis. And you've got corporations in Dearborn and Franklin counties that do support major industries with different components and needs. And in the Cincinnati metro area, information technologies and analytical instruments, aerospace and defense, food processing, and medical devices are targeted industries. And what makes this a good thing is that for the state of Indiana also, these 4 major industrial sectors are also key targets for the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. So there's an opportunity here to take advantage of the location, the market location of Franklin and Dearborn counties, to really start to be proactive, looking at the supply chains of these industries and starting to target what kind of industries could and should locate in the Franklin Dearborn area, as the I-74 corridor and other parts of each of the counties, the US 50 corridor as well, and Dearborn, can grow and expand to meet the needs of some of these significant growing industries as their major targets for the state, and also have significant presence in the Cincinnati metropolitan marketplace. I'm going to turn now over to Mike and Nick to kind of walk through some of the major regional findings that were developed through this process, and then talk about the goals. Mike?
Sure, thanks, Matt. So yeah, the target clusters identified here. This was one of the most useful things, at least in the early going since completing this strategic plan. We found most useful because this is going to better inform our targeted marketing and our business attraction efforts. When we look at what target industries we want to go after, it's important. And if these are big in Cincinnati, it's important to brand Southeast Indiana, Dearborn and Franklin counties as having the unique asset in the Cincinnati region of being Indiana and offering all the extra little things that Indiana has that maybe Ohio and Kentucky don't. So as businesses look to grow or expand in the Cincinnati region, these are industries we can go after and show them the value of doing business in the Hoosier State. So next few slides, Nick and I will take over. So as Matt mentioned, we went through a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges. And these are things we know and feel about Southeast Indiana generally, if you were to ask a group of people around here. So a lot of these things, these bullet points we see through the next couple slides were identified by the local stakeholders at our workshops who helped us develop this plan. There were 18 representatives, as you saw earlier, from the 2 counties. On the natural assets, the Ohio River, the Whitewater River, even the hills here. And the hills are a challenge in some ways, but in other ways are kind of nice to have for scenery and a nice place that people would want to live and have views where they live. As far as access goes, highways, it's fairly easy to get to most places. We don't have, we might occasionally have a Friday afternoon backup on US 50 down here in Lawrenceburg. Traffic jams are by and large not a major problem as they would be in the heart of a metro here. So that's a desirable thing that people would consider when they look at where to live and where to do business. And there's, of course, a very strong sense of community here. Self-reliant people, when I think of folks in Southeast Indiana, willing to help their friends and neighbors in need and in tough times, and certainly efforts to maintain and beautify our towns and our cities. Nick?
Yeah, I think more than anything too, the strong sense of community and work ethic is there with these natural assets. We were able to pull together a group of people pretty easily, take a few days of their time, put some thoughts down, have some really great conversations that crossed typical community boundary lines that exist because of basketball and football, and are able to overcome some of those barriers and really have a discussion. I think one of the great things that occurred is as we were all talking and reporting out in our groups, I think we realized that we do have a lot of similar strengths across the boundaries. We recognize that our challenges are quite similar and not unique. and that there is a strong sense of wanting to work together and wanting to tackle economic development in the most effective and efficient manner. And I think the outcomes of this plan will put us on a path regionally, obviously, to continue working towards those goals. And I think the identification of some of the demographics that Matt had alluded to allow us to focus in on, hey, yes, we do have some strengths, particularly from an education workforce perspective, but some of those issues could come back to bite us if we don't start banding together and really tackling some of these larger issues so that we can, reshore some of our workforce. We can reverse a downward trend in population and really begin to band together for the greater good of the region.
Yes, on the workforce note here and our strengths, of course, we have great Ivy Tech campuses that are convenient in Batesville, Lawrenceburg, and even up the road in Richmond for folks who may be in Brookville or Northern Franklin County. And then being part of that Cincinnati Metro, having access to 16 colleges and universities within a 45-minute drive of where we are is a major asset. So as far as opportunities that were identified by our groups, roadways to area metros, those bring us tourism. People looking to spend tourism dollars, and we have great tourism attractions, as we all know, throughout Dearborn and Franklin counties, whether it's Brookville Reservoir or Perfect North Slopes, the Ohio River, you name it. We like to say we have year-round recreation here. That's something not many areas can brag about, but we can. CVTBs have done pretty well in branding Southeast Indiana as the place to play. Is it now time for a bigger conversation around how we market and brand our counties as great places to live and do business? If we want to grow housing and attract employers, we got to have a cohesive story to tell on those things. Agribusiness concentration for business attraction. The I-74 Business Corridor Group may soon be embarking on a strategy along those lines soon. So we're seeing gaining momentum on that particular bullet point. With trails at One Dearborn, we're wrapping up a countywide trails report with Jack Sutton, the former CEO of Hamilton County, Ohio Great Parks, an award-winning park system, who lives here in Dearborn County and is now helping inform our trails discussion as we look at trails connectivity, not only between Dearborn and Franklin counties, where there are certainly opportunities we'll talk a little bit more about later, but also, regionally with Ohio and Kentucky. Looking at the fourth port in Lawrenceburg, of course, much has been made of that opportunity, and Ports of Indiana and the Brownfield Cleanup Company still under contract for that important project, and the existing infrastructure on the river and with the railway there are incredibly valuable assets. And there's a pretty great show of regional partnership around that effort with the port and with the collaboration that exists with the Southeast Indiana Regional Port Authority, which is between the cities of Lawrenceburg, Aurora, Greendale, and Dearborn County. So we're already seeing regional collaboration in some areas. And if we can look across county lines and see if there's opportunities to partner regionally on an even bigger basis, that's really the crux of what this strategic plan starts to get down to.
Yeah, Mike, and with that too, I think a lot of, when you look at these opportunities, they inform a lot of the action items that are coming out of this. You can start to see, as we're building upon this process that we went through, how these building blocks are coming together to create some strategic action items. We are connected, I think, is what it really comes down to. We're connected physically with infrastructure. We can build better connections. We're connected in Southeast Indiana on our cultural and community assets. I think obviously these opportunities are, and formulating and formalizing those opportunities are obviously critical to working regionally and continue to be able to accomplish some of the goals that we'll lay out here momentarily.
Real quick on the bullet about I-74, I-275, State Road 1, and so on. State Road 1, certainly a lot of opportunity there for Dearborn and Franklin counties on site development and infrastructure. Partnerships are already being talked about there, whether it's with utility partners and between our economic development efforts in our respective counties. There's already conversation happening there as far as what opportunity exists that we aren't fully realizing along State Road 1 and I-74.
That's an excellent point, Mike. I think a lot too can be said to, our regional interest in diversifying our agricultural base, how we, even some of the conversations that have risen within our public meetings about, formalizing an effort towards some sort of a regional processing facility. These are items I think that too, we want to get ahead of everyone and say that yes, this process started about a year ago of putting this plan together. The rollout of it certainly was impacted from a scheduling perspective by the pandemic, but the efforts were still happening behind the scenes as we were waiting kind of for today to make this presentation of speaking on processing facilities, trail expansion, what I believe to be low-hanging fruit on the activation of State Route 1 and getting closer to that I-74 interchange in St. Leon. We'll talk about this momentarily, but improving our infrastructure, our broadband capacities and capabilities. I think we all acknowledge the role that tourism plays from an economic development position within our communities, and we as economic developers need to support and promote that and those efforts that the CVBs are doing as well. But that kind of leads into this slide, Mike.
Yeah, so this is, we're kind of going to start at the high level and work our way down kind of to some more clearly identified goals. So we're kind of at the 1,000-foot view here as far as the shared coming out of this strategic plan for a regional partnership with Dearborn and Franklin counties. And a piece of this section of the strategic plan that really stuck out to me, and it's just one sentence, but it states, a regional approach opens doors to new opportunities within and around the region for investment and growth through co-investment, planning, leadership, and connectivity. And that's really what it's all about. It's breaking down those silos, not duplicating efforts between counties. Why work separately toward the same goals when we can work together? In our stakeholder meetings, we all agreed that a regional frame of mind thinking would be important. We did a word cloud exercise. Some of the most commonly submitted words through that were infrastructure, marketing, potential, trails, growth, connected, prosperous. And we also identified a need to talk further about truly determining what our region is. Is it just Dearborn and Franklin counties? What about Ripley County? What about the city of Batesville? That's an economic center for Southeast Indiana, and would probably be beneficial to include them perhaps in marketing and planning regionally with all the great things happening in Batesville and other counties, certainly as we think of Southeast Indiana in a larger sense as well. That'll be a discussion to be had coming out of this.
I think really the main goal here is how do we work together to create a more prosperous region? How do we work together to improve our connectivity? And how do we work together to ensure that we reverse potential trend of decreased population? Our efforts are not in vain. They're for growth. They're growth-minded actions and goals.
Well stated. Yeah. So again, this is kind of the 1,000-foot view. So we'll come down a little bit closer here, and as we identified after that, some shared goals that we have. As we continue through the workshop, we could see these themes developing in regionalism, quality of life, and infrastructure. So we began working on those. Nick, you may want to speak more to this.
Yeah, Mike, I think like you were stating, this becomes a little more granular. Obviously, we have a high level vision that preceded, but then as we started to put our thoughts almost into, they just sort of naturally went into buckets of goals. And that's more on the following slide, Mike. That's where it really sort of comes together. But looking at these 9 primary focus areas that fall across 3 pretty distinct categories. We've alluded to some of these items already. We know the importance of broadband, transportation, sewer and water expansion, that infrastructure that's critical for both attracting new industry, keeping folks here, and being able to just build better communities. Quality of life, I think we all agree that we've got it in spades, but that doesn't mean we can't improve on it. Looking at how we tackle regionally housing development and different housing styles and structures within our communities. Trail expansion, we have fantastic trail systems that could be expanded and connected. And then how do we effectively promote the nice common amenities that we have, these assets that we have across our communities? And then not to put it down at the bottom by any stretch of imagination or intention is this concept of regionalism, which, partnership is hard. It takes time, but it's critical in this effort to be able to pull our resources together to make marked change in the community. And we look at how do we work together to increase our capacity to be able to take on some of these projects? How are we developing our messaging and marketing message as one Southeast Indiana, and then obviously driven by our skills that we have from a workforce perspective and our proximity to some of these industries in Cincinnati, and driven by well thought out target industry analysis that aligns well with IEDC. How are we working better with all of these resources regionally and statewide, and even performing outreach to those folks in Cincinnati to further our business attraction efforts to lead to new job creation, capital investment, that sort of thing.
So we'll focus first, kind of zoom in even closer here, and specific action items that were identified under each of those 3 goals: infrastructure, quality of life, and regionalism. So starting with infrastructure, Nick and I and everybody agreed that this is maybe one of the most important. This and quality of life are kind of going to be most tangible goals for the group here today. But when it comes to infrastructure, that's something we can't lose sight of. So that's the foundation of what we got going on here. So in Dearborn County, the US 50 corridor can be crowded at times. As I mentioned, in Franklin County, it's as I mentioned, I grew up there, still have family there, so I travel through Franklin County quite often. I know it's a real pain when US 52 has to be closed for weeks or months for a slide repair. If we add new homes and businesses, there's going to need to be a plan to scale up our infrastructure, our roads, our sewer, water, everything like that. Needless to say, broadband, especially through COVID, and perhaps that accelerating the shift toward work from home or remote work is going to be just increasingly an important issue for rural communities who want to grow or perhaps even just maintain their populations. This is something that COVID's put only a brighter spot on that. So, Nick,
And the great thing is, Mike, I mean, these are things we're already working on as a region. I mean, looking at the broadband picture, the regional broadband study for Southeast Indiana has been achieved, at least initially speaking. We've begun looking at our maps and working with utility providers and looking at how do we bridge that digital gap. What's the financial gap there to start to light up some of these communities? And I think, like you said, the pandemic has further provided case studies for the need for having a presence online, having access to a fundamental need of broadband and internet for education, for commerce. As Mike alluded to, transportation. Again, I think we can all agree that one of the easiest pathways for us to share and our lowest hanging fruit is probably that State Route 1 corridor. And then our two groups are already talking about, with a project like that, talking about pooling our resources and assets. Some of these things that we've developed in silos, now it's sharing our materials together with regards to, what service levels are there, who's serving this area, can we look at service territory trades, who are our providers potentially for these areas. So the great thing is work on these items has already been occurring.
Yep. And you mentioned the funding mechanism of solving some of these problems in the appendix of the strategic plan, which you'll have access to not long after the presentation today. It does include an appendix section where the team has identified funding avenues, funding agencies, and opportunities that we might be able to go after and properly resource the efforts to make headway in a number of these areas. Quality of life, another one of the three goals, gets down to the idea of clearly branding our region. Why would anybody want to live here or do business here? Focusing on the idea that some of our great tourism assets are also fantastic amenities that make Dearborn and Franklin counties a great place to live. We should continue to think about improving and investing in those things and touting those. Also focus on the fundamentals of a great community that we enjoy, things that attract families. And perhaps we take for granted, but they're very important. We live in safe communities generally in Southeast Indiana. We have very good public schools. A lot of communities like to say that, but I think the proof's in the pudding that that's even more so the case here. Community events, entertainment options as we look around throughout the region. So those are just some of the things to focus on under the housing bullet there. At One Dearborn last year, we completed a housing analysis. We actually had the pleasure of working with our esteemed consultant, Matt Roof, in developing.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep, gotta give the tip of the hat to Matt. And that has built some momentum in the housing area here in Dearborn County as we look to grow our population to help meet our employers' workforce needs, to grow our population and keep our schools open with ample enrollment and so on. We're using that housing study now in Dearborn County to provide some information and as the impetus for taking a look at our zoning code. Currently, Dearborn County has just one residential zoning designation. But one key finding that came out of our housing report was maybe multiple zoning designations are needed for housing. Rural residential, low density housing, medium density housing, even high density housing. There are places in Dearborn County, in the unincorporated county, which we think of as largely rural, which might actually make sense for high density housing where there's the proper infrastructure to handle it. Nick?
Yes, I think what, the real summarization of the housing component is, again, it's about smart growth, efficient growth, growing in the right place, prioritizing your areas, targeting them based on their ability to be developed, reaching out to those folks with the means to invest in your community, and acknowledging that there may be gaps that need to be addressed and filled. And I think too, Mike, and it's going to allude more in the next slide though, and you see a lot of this creating teams. And that's a really big component is, creating teams to tackle some of these items and have accountability for them so that we're not just doing these things in a vacuum, that we're working together to assess, prioritize, and not necessarily duplicate, and identify what already exists so that we can do our best to put those on the appropriate pedestal and promote those appropriately as well.
So on the third goal being regionalism, so as we continue through the workshop, we can again see these themes developing, and this goal gets down to eliminating the gaps in economic development efforts. Again, breaking down those silos. Do Dearborn and Franklin County lead the way, perhaps in forming a regional economic development organization or group, or just focusing on business attraction regionally? We already have that, some of those things to a certain degree with the I-74 business corridor and the things they have going. Look at examples like a Ready Cincinnati or a One Southern Indiana. Does the appetite and the need exist enough for a regional sort of marketing and economic development outfit exist here between our two counties, and as we mentioned before, maybe with some of our other communities in this region. So
Mike, too, a lot of this is about regional identity, regional messaging, where it's collaborative. It's competitive. Yes, economic development is competitive, but it's collaborative across the state of Indiana, and that we know that Dearborn County's victories, they are Franklin County's victories. Franklin County's victories can be shared and celebrated by Dearborn, and that when we're competing together for the benefit of Southeast Indiana.
All right, so what are the next steps for us to focus on? So where do we go from here? We got the strategic plan wrapped up with our presentation today. It is a number of pages long. You'll be welcome to read it, but you kind of got the Cliff Notes version of it here. Where do we go from here? So these are some next steps which our stakeholders identified. How do we continue to have this conversation and move the ball on any one of the number of these specific goals we've identified? And you're going to need people to do it. I know Nick and John in Franklin County will be there in for it. I know I'll be in it here, one Dearborn and our board of directors, and Terry will be in it here. We'll be doing what we can to push that conversation forward, but who else wants to join us and keep that momentum going? If you're interested, we'd certainly love to hear from you, because it's going to be an all hands on deck type of mentality that's going to be needed to, as we looked at those demographic predictions for the future that Matt Roof looked at for us a little earlier in the presentation. Time's ticking, the clock's ticking. We're not, that's not predetermined. Where the demographics and the population trends going to go. We can change those things. We can continue to attract businesses and develop sites and add housing and bring broadband to everybody, no matter how far out on the farm you may live. So with one working team, are there committees within a working team to focus on each of these individual areas? That'll be part of the conversation going forward.
Yeah, Mike, I think that's the key takeaway here, is that we have identified goals that we want to work for. We know we need to roll up our sleeves, get back together, get to work, dig into some of these things, assess the progress that we've had to date, prioritize our collaborative efforts, and keep this work. This was something that was an investment from the state of Indiana into our region. The state of Indiana is not going anywhere. They've got our back and want to see us further these ideas in this plan. This is not something that we're putting up on a shelf. These are priorities and pillars that are driving our efforts moving forward.
Yep. So like I said, if you want to get involved, and I know many people here, you already are. That's why you were invited today, because you're people who are already working in some of these spaces. So we'll be engaging you further as we look to, start to put this plan into action here. And with that, I'm going to throw it back to Matt Roof. And Matt, any final comments you have as we wrap up our regional economic development plan? And Nick, anything else from you? And I know we probably got a few thank yous and plenty of folks that we need to make sure we acknowledge here.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and the importance of regional economic development makes economic development easier locally when you share resources and you have some very common big drivers like the I-74 corridor that kind of melts the two counties certainly together. And it makes it easier for the state of Indiana Economic Development Corporation to understand the needs and plug in resources where they can, as they have with this pilot, to help underwrite some of this original work right now for the two counties to move forward. So with that, turn it over back to you, Mike. Did you get questions? And we've got a few minutes before 3 o'clock for folks that may have any comments or questions they'd like to share. Thank you.
Yeah, again, if you do have questions, if you won't mind, just go ahead and type them into the chat window, and we'll try to answer those the best we can here quickly. So we did have one from Andrea. I'm interested in being part of future discussions to help work toward goals and help connect the two counties as well as other parts of the region. Not really a question, but hey, Andrea's in with us next. So one today.
Andrea, you just got drafted, so thanks for your volunteering.
Yep. So will the presentation slides be shared with everyone? Yeah, we'll share the presentation slides, and the formal report itself will be shared publicly. We'll have it on our website at onedearborn.org. And Nick, it's the website where you plan to publish it?
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and place it on the front page of the Economic Development Commission's page on the Franklin County government website.
Jenny asks, are you considering rolling in Batesville into the region? They're currently working on very simple projects that could affect the regional employment resources. So yeah, we do have conversations with Batesville. I think Sarah's on the call with us today, Sarah Lamping, their economic development director, tuning in, I believe, with us. And yeah, we have, with our regional groups, the I-74 Business Corridor or the Southeast Indiana Growth Alliance, we do regularly have conversations with our economic developers in the region. And yeah,
I would say that was kind of a point that was made on almost every one of our working sessions was, a part of Batesville is in Franklin County. So they're very much part of this region. They share our in our assets and our primary corridors. So absolutely, we're always thinking of Batesville. Yes.
Yeah, and of course, workforce is a common discussion anywhere in economic development these days. And anytime we get together with those regional groups, workforce is usually part of the discussion. So that's the only other question I saw. Oh, here's one from Wes. How do you see changing residential zoning will improve the cities and towns of the two counties? Will this plan try to increase density in the cities in the two counties? So I mentioned in Dearborn County, county planning and zoning is taking a look at its residential zoning code and setting up multiple types of residential zoning districts, but still residential zoning within the cities and towns is handled within those cities and towns. But as I mentioned, in One Dearborn, when we did the housing study with Matt Roof last year, it wasn't just concerning the incorporated county. We brought in stakeholders not only from the county, but also our cities here in Dearborn County. And so they're also taking things from our One Dearborn housing study and putting those into practice as they look at their housing challenges and their housing opportunities, certainly. All right, SLD asks, what is the first important item to work on, that low-hanging fruit, so to speak? I don't know. It's all very important. Which one do you go after first? Which is the low-hanging fruit? Nick, you give observations there?
Mike, you cut out. Were you asking me?
Yeah, your thoughts on what low-hanging fruit items, as far as maybe some of those goals.
Again, I think, broadband, yes. I think probably a longer term discussion on trail connections, I think are going to be critical. Again, I've said it from the beginning of this presentation. I started to speak. I think that the SR1 corridor is, our primary area for opportunity to work together. And it probably has, if you want to talk about pilot projects, working on utility coordination and land use out there, maybe even master planning that corridor. Don't want to get too far ahead of myself and commit other monies that nobody's really talked about to their boards yet. But I mean, those are the things that I see. And again, we've had those conversations amongst our two counties. Obviously, we want to get further into those. They sort of naturally rose while this plan while we were undergoing this plan development too. And I think utility coordination through that area and capacity building is going to be critical. But yeah, that to me, that would be one thing that I'd love to work with Dearborn County's ED folks on.
Yeah, I would say capacity is probably low-hanging fruit. Again, getting a working team together around this plan, and as Nick mentioned earlier, making sure it doesn't just sit on a shelf and start collecting dust, but begin to put it into action. So I see that as probably the primary low-hanging fruit, is building that capacity, bringing those stakeholders to the table, and getting these people working together and talking cross-county lines and working together as one and not two separate counties for the benefit of everybody. I see that as low-hanging fruit.
I agree with you, Mike.
We might be able to. One other thing I think we might be able to tackle quickly is branding and marketing of the area. What that looks like, what that brand is. I think in Dearborn County, through our own economic development planning efforts, we kind of have a pretty good idea of what our elevator speech is when it comes to business attraction. But what's our elevator speech when it comes to getting housing developers to leap into action here in Southeast Indiana? That might need to be a bit more, and where this working team and the strategic plan might certainly help us in that regard.
Yeah, and I think too, Mike, we probably lean on and take notes from our CVB folks who have, they've been marketing our area, right? That's been one of their main drivers, is bring folks to our area, and we could probably learn a lot from them through that.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So if you have anything else there, now or never. But I do want to say this, again, was one of my first projects to work on in economic development. I was in local journalism here in Southeast Indiana for a number of years. So I kind of saw some of these opportunities and challenges kind of from afar. And but when you're in journalism, you don't always, you kind of see the finished product a lot of times. You don't see how the sausage is made. And so I'm getting to see that aspect of it now, and I've just have a growing respect for people involved in economic development here in Southeast Indiana who want to see our communities continue to be great places to live, to bring additional jobs and additional tax base to our communities. And I'm really excited to be in a career like this now, and working with people like Nick and at IEDC and Matt Roof. With TPMA and everybody else on our teams, and certainly hope we get to chat with everybody more on down the road.
Hey, Mike, I have a question for Mr. Stanton. Is IEDC putting any money into this pilot?
We already did.
Yeah, no, you may have missed my opening comments, but the reason this initiative was kicked off is because of Indiana Economic Development Corporation looking for a key area within the state that aligned with, had strengths already, needed to be organized, and thought a regional pilot would work. And it was through IEDC that helped underwrite most of this work. So very important to note that. Thank you for asking.
Great. Okay. Any final comments, Mr. Staton or Matt?
No, I just it's a great part, a great corner of the state, great advantages, and I hope excited to have been a part of it really through the housing study, but then most recently with this strategic regional economic development plan, and help these two dynamic counties continue to organize where it makes sense along the I-74 corridor and some other broader marketing areas as well. So great first step, and looking forward to the two counties continuing to move the ball forward and continue to prosper. So thank you.
All right, I suppose that's it. So we're right on the dot, 3 o'clock. Good job, everybody. And look forward to hearing from you. Any thoughts, reach out to Nick or I, and we can try and point you in the right direction, if not help you directly. So have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.